Truyền hình Việt Nam vùng Hòa Thịnh Đốn, chúng tôi xin trân trọng kính chào quý khán thính giả. Kính thưa quý vị, hôm nay là buổi chiều thứ Ba, ngày 24 tháng 5 năm 2016. Thưa quý vị, chúng tôi đang ở tại building của AUSA Conference and Center ở tại số 2425 Wilson Boulevard in Arlington. Thưa quý vị, để gửi đến quý vị phóng sự về cái buổi sinh hoạt của Army Historical Association. Thưa quý vị, đây là một cái tổ chức, họ đang cố gắng để muốn thiết lập, xây dựng một cái viện bảo tàng cho Army của Hoa Kỳ. Thưa quý vị, nói đến quân đội Hoa Kỳ thì có nhiều sắc dân đã tham dự, đã vào trong quân đội, tức là coi như là không phải là người Việt Nam không, mà có người Đại Hàn, người Nhật, người Lào, người Hờ Mông, người Korean. Thưa quý vị, vân vân, thì hôm nay đây là lần đầu tiên họ tổ chức cái buổi họp mặt này để mà vinh danh những người quân nhân những người đã phục vụ và đã hy sinh, cũng như những người đã về hưu, cũng như những người đang tại ngũ. Thưa quý vị, trong cái căn phòng này có rất là đông người Mỹ cũng như là những quân nhân của các quốc gia. Đặc biệt hôm nay là cái ngày trong cái tháng 5 này là tháng dành cho Á Châu Thái Bình Dương. Thưa quý vị, và cũng là gần đến cái ngày lễ chiến sĩ trận vong Memorial Day. Thành thử ra một cái tổ chức này rất là ý nghĩa. Họ muốn xây cái tượng đài và đang cố gắng, và cái hy vọng rằng họ sẽ thành lập cái tượng đài, một cái viện bảo tàng, và hy vọng rằng họ sẽ thành hình trong vòng vài năm nữa. Thưa quý vị, ở đây chúng tôi có gặp được một số những người cựu quân nhân, người Mỹ gốc Việt, và cũng có những người đang tại ngũ như Trung tướng Lương Xuân Việt và một vài vị sĩ quan khác của Việt Nam, người Mỹ gốc Việt. Thưa quý vị, và chúng tôi mời quý vị theo dõi những hình ảnh chúng tôi ghi nhận được. Bây giờ là cái buổi tiệc bắt đầu là 5:30 chiều và sẽ chấm dứt trong bao lâu không biết, nhưng mà thấy mọi người rất là vui vẻ và gặp nhau với những người đã có những vị tướng hồi hưu, có những người đã từng phục vụ trong quân đội, và chúng tôi xin mời quý vị theo dõi những hình ảnh này. Kính thưa quý khán thính giả, trong cái buổi họp mặt hôm nay có cái chủ đề là The Soldier Experience Series và có những cái tiết mục khác. Và thưa quý vị, trong đó có những quân nhân, cựu quân nhân cũng như là những người tại ngũ như lúc nãy chúng tôi có giới thiệu là người Mỹ gốc Việt. Và thưa quý vị, mời quý vị nghe một vài phút nói chuyện với cựu đại tá Nguyễn Dương. Dạ thưa chào đại tá.
Tôi là bác sĩ Nguyễn Dương, tôi gia nhập quân đội Mỹ năm 1979 và từ đó leo thang cấp bậc dần dần cho tới khi đại tá năm 1992. Sau đó tôi giải ngũ năm 1999. Tôi đã tham dự trận đánh ở Kuwait. Hiện giờ tôi về hưu và làm thiện nguyện cho Arlington Free Clinic. Hôm nay hội Army Historical Foundation, tức là hội quân đội Mỹ sử ký, có mời tôi tới đây để họp chung với những người cựu quân nhân đã tham dự các chiến trận cùng quân đội Mỹ mà là người chủng tộc khác như là Nhật Bản, Philippines, Việt Nam nữa, Lào, Mông nữa, vâng. Thành tôi lấy làm hãnh diện được tới đây để đại diện cho người Mỹ gốc Việt đã từng làm sĩ quan của hai quân đội Việt Nam Cộng Hòa và quân đội Mỹ.
Dạ thưa bác sĩ đại tá, khi mà đến đây gặp lại thấy những khuôn mặt quen thuộc của những người cựu chiến binh cũng như những người đang tại hiện dịch, thì bác sĩ có cái cảm tưởng như thế nào?
Tôi cảm tưởng là rất là hãnh diện được là cùng bạn với những chiến sĩ đồng minh đó, và cũng thấy là cảm thông với sự hy sinh của nhiều quân đội Mỹ mà gốc ngoại quốc, gốc Á Châu đã hy sinh cho nước Mỹ. Okay.
Nói tóm lại là bất cứ những người quân nhân, cựu quân nhân hay là những người tại ngũ đều chiến đấu giống nhau, đều làm việc giống nhau và đều có một cái tấm lòng can đảm và phục vụ cho cái lý tưởng rất là coi như là hãnh diện và rất là đầy đủ, coi như là chu toàn cái bổn phận.
Vâng, thì cũng như nhìn hình cái này, các chân dung của các quân nhân ngoại quốc, Trung Hoa, Nhật Bản, Philippines đã anh hùng chiến đấu cho lý tưởng tự do của quân đội Hoa Kỳ.
Kính thưa quý khán thính giả, trong quân lực Hoa Kỳ, thưa quý vị, có một người Mỹ gốc Việt đã lên cái cấp bậc là chuẩn tướng. Thưa quý vị, như đã biết là mọi người hầu như trên tất cả người Việt ở trên khắp nơi đều biết về cái tin này và rất là hãnh diện. Thưa quý vị, hôm nay trong cái buổi gặp gỡ của các cựu quân nhân cũng như những người đang tại ngũ ở tại cái hội trường này, thì chúng tôi sẽ có gặp được chuẩn tướng Lương Xuân Việt và chuẩn tướng sẽ có vài lời với chúng ta. Thưa chào chuẩn tướng.
Dạ, kính thưa các thính giả, dạ, trước hết tôi muốn gửi lời chào các thính giả và cũng một lời chúc cho tất cả mọi thính giả một năm thật là vui vẻ và mọi sự như ý.
Thưa chuẩn tướng, nói đến nhà binh, nói đến nhất là đặc biệt là của lục quân Hoa Kỳ, thì chắc có lẽ nhiều người không có hiểu rõ lắm, cũng như là cái sinh hoạt hôm nay. Thưa chuẩn tướng có thể nói qua về những cái gì mà chuẩn tướng nghĩ rằng mọi người cần nên biết về cái chuyện mà mình đang có mặt ở đây.
Dạ thưa chị, cái buổi tiệc này là một cái buổi tiệc đặc biệt mà cái hội gọi là AUSA, là Association of the United States Army, đã tổ chức để vinh danh mấy anh em gốc Á ở trong quân đội cho những cái đóng góp trong mấy chục năm nay.
Chuẩn tướng, đặc biệt là gần đến ngày chiến sĩ trận vong, cũng như là cái tháng năm này là tháng châu Á Thái Bình Dương, thì cái đó là cũng cái điều nó cũng có nhiều ý nghĩa giống nhau, phải không thưa chuẩn tướng? Tức là nhớ những người đã nằm xuống và những người đã phục vụ và đã về hưu và hiện tại hôm nay. Thưa chuẩn tướng, như vậy thì cái tổ chức này họ tổ chức có thường xuyên không hay là đây là lần đầu tiên?
Thì nghe nói cho ban tổ chức nói là lần này lần đầu tiên. Thật ra mấy cái người chủng tộc khác thì mọi năm người ta vẫn làm đều, nhưng mà đối với dân Á Đông thì tôi nghe nói là năm này là năm đầu tiên mà làm cái tiệc lớn như vậy. Thì mình nghĩ là mình là người Việt Nam mà đàn anh trong quân đội thì bắt buộc là mình phải có ở đây để đại diện cho chủng tộc.
Như vậy là thưa chuẩn tướng nghĩ sao về cái chương trình mà Tổng thống Obama có làm để mà vinh danh, để biết ơn và để cho những người chiến sĩ, những quân lực Hoa Kỳ trước đây đã không có được người ta quan tâm tới nhiều, nhất là trong chiến tranh Việt Nam. Thì thưa chuẩn tướng nghĩ sao về cái vấn đề?
Tôi nghĩ cái điều đó là rất tốt, mà tôi cũng rất là cảm ơn Tổng thống đã tỏ lòng mà làm như vậy. Nhưng mà tôi nghĩ không những là các anh em cựu chiến binh trong quân đội Hoa Kỳ, mà tôi nghĩ là rất là quan trọng cái tháng 5 này, khi mà mình nghĩ tới những người mà đã hy sinh, những cái người mà đã tử trận để cho tự do, thì mình bắt buộc mình cũng phải nghĩ tới những anh em ở trong quân lực Việt Nam Cộng Hòa, những người cha, những người chú mình đã hy sinh bao nhiêu năm để cho mình có cơ hội hôm nay.
Thưa chuẩn tướng, như vậy thì bây giờ nói về chuẩn tướng là chuẩn tướng về Washington DC, xong bây giờ chuẩn tướng lại dời đi một chỗ khác. Tất cả đồng hương ở đây rất là buồn, nghĩ là sao mới đi, nhưng mà họ không hiểu là cuộc đời binh nghiệp là cứ phải rày đây mai đó. Thưa chuẩn tướng, nhìn cái bộ quân phục và những huy chương trên này thì chiến tích rất là nhiều. Thưa chuẩn tướng, về cái chỗ mới thì như thế nào?
Về chỗ mới thì rất là cái địa vị đó thì rất là mở mang cho mình trong tương lai. Thì trong lòng thì mình cũng sẵn sàng mà mình chấp nhận cái việc mới, mà mình biết là có thử thách rất là nhiều. Nhưng mà nửa lòng mình thì mình cũng muốn ở lại đây, tại vì mình nghĩ trong vòng 1 năm nay mình đã làm cho phòng 8 mà đã chuyên môn mà lo hết cho những cái chương trình vũ khí tối tân nhất của lục quân, thì cũng là một cái vinh dự. Mà sau khi 1 năm thì mình nghĩ mình đã học hỏi được đầy đủ để có thể đóng góp, thì cũng hơi tiếc là mình phải đi. Nhưng mà khi mà tôi có cơ hội mà đối thoại với đại tướng, những lãnh đạo ở trong quân đực, thì người ta đã nói là tại vì quân đội lục quân muốn anh càng mở mang thêm để càng tiến lên thêm. thì cái điều đó thì mình cũng rất là vui.
Như vậy thì con đường mà binh nghiệp và con đường đi lên của chuẩn tướng chắc là trong tương lai sẽ có một lên được promotion cao hơn nữa, phải không chuẩn tướng?
Cái đó thì mình không nói, chị thật sự mình không nghĩ tới. Nhưng mà mình nghĩ tóm tắt lại là cái đời binh nghiệp mình, nếu mà mình cứ làm những cái việc mà hồi xưa đến giờ mình vẫn làm từ hồi lúc mà mình là chuẩn úy mà mới ra trường, cái mà sát cánh với anh em, cái mà đối đãi đàng hoàng với những người trong binh chủng của mình, những người trong đơn vị mình, và lúc nào mình cũng có thể là có cái tinh thần thật là quật cường và cố gắng. Tại vì mình biết đó là tại vì mình là dân thiểu số, nhiều khi cái sức khỏe mình cũng không bằng người khác, nhiều khi cái tiếng nói mình cũng là không phải là tiếng nói mẹ đẻ, nhưng mà mình cố gắng lúc nào cũng ở từ chiến trường tới ở đơn vị, lúc nào cũng muốn là xuất sắc để cho mình làm cho bố mẹ mình được vẻ vang và làm cho chủng tộc mình cũng được vẻ vang.
Những lời này chắc là những người bạn trẻ cần phải nghe. Thưa chuẩn tướng, trong vòng có mười mấy năm mà từ thiếu úy mà lên tới chuẩn tướng, như vậy là cái đoạn đường nó quá nhanh quá ngắn. Tại vì chuẩn tướng khiêm nhường nói, nhưng mà chắc là mình cũng phải có nhiều cái tài giỏi lắm, mà cái đóng góp của mình cũng rất là có được người ta nhận thấy cái điều đó, thành ra mới như vậy. Chứ còn thường có nhiều người ở trong quân đội lâu lắm đâu có lên được cái chức.
Nhưng mà mình nói những cái tính cách của mình, những cái chí khí của mình là tôi cũng nghĩ là phần đông là của ông cha mà để lại. Mà người bố tôi là một sĩ quan thủy quân lục chiến ở quân lực Việt Nam Cộng Hòa. Tôi nghĩ nếu mà so sánh với những người trong binh chủng tôi thì tôi cũng nghĩ là rất ít người mà có thể là có đủ tài ba như là thân phụ của tôi.
Cảm ơn chuẩn tướng rất là nhiều, những lời đầy các bạn trẻ nên nghe. Tại vì dù gì đi nữa thì vẫn nghĩ đến công ơn cha mẹ.
Dạ, rất là đúng. Dạ.
Cảm ơn chuẩn tướng rất là nhiều. Dạ. Kính thưa quý vị, chúng tôi mời quý vị nghe một vài phút nói chuyện với một người ở trong cái tổ chức Army Historical Association. Đây là cô Hoa Mặc Nạp. Thưa quý vị, và cái công việc mà cô Hoa Mặc Nạp phụ trách đó là vấn đề membership của cái tổ chức này. Dạ, xin chào chị Hoa.
Dạ, xin chào chị.
Mình can nói tiếng Việt hay tiếng Mỹ? Can you tell me about this association? How is it established and how long have it been in working on?
This is the Army Historical Foundation. We are campaigning to build the United States Army National Museum. And I'm with the foundation since 1999. The foundation started in 1983. And we are campaigning to raise the money to build the United States Army National Museum. And tonight, we celebrate the Asian American for all the soldiers, to honor them. This month, this month.
It's close to the
Memorial Day. That is it.
So if this association is it for the soldier, their family can be the member, or someone else outside can join this?
Anyone can join to become a member, to support the foundation, to support the museum. Because without the family, the soldier cannot go fight by themselves. So they have a family behind them. So that's why we campaign. We have the family, husband, children, anybody want to join, they can become a member.
So the association with the purpose of that one to recognize, to storage all the document, all the image and everything about the war, about the army.
Right. We call a soldier registry. All the vet can go in there and register themselves, tell their story. That's why we have all this story. Those are come from
someone who died on duty, and someone still here, and someone,
When the museum built, we transfer over the National Museum. All this picture, they all will transfer over to the National Museum.
So what I understand that the plan, the museum will be at Fort Belvoir.
That is correct. The museum on Fort Belvoir, It's supposed to be open 2019, within 3 years. Right. So hopefully the groundbreak this year. That is the plan for the groundbreak.
Is that the first museum for Army?
This is the National Museum.
Okay.
Army have different museum, different area, different. Right, but this one is for the national, for the whole Army.
U.S. military.
That is just for the U.S. Army.
For the Army.
Yes.
But in different branch,
Different brand, they have their own, but when this museum built, they're all connected. This for the national.
That's a good thing to do, you know, to honor and to value them, right?
I try to do my job to honor all the vets.
So I can be the member, right?
Yes, you can be the member.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
We designated this series and began it as a sort of a prelude to the opening of the National Museum of the U.S. Army. Some of the artifacts that you see and some of what you see here tonight will be there. By the way, for those of you who are donors and are interested in it, we've cut all the trees, we're working on the ground, and we'll do the formal breaking of ground probably in late summer or September. So it's very real, it's there, and it's coming out of the ground. Tonight, I'd like to remind you that in February of this year, we started with the African American World War I experience. And then in March, we did Women in the Army, terrific. And today and tonight, we are going to bring together stories and events and memories and lessons about the Asian American and Pacific Islander experience in the history of our nation. We pay tribute tonight to this special group of people who've served our Army and our nation with distinction, some of whom are doing so tonight and are in uniform with us. They serve with pride, valor, dignity, and they do all of that despite having been historically overlooked, marginalized, some cases deprived of their benefits, and indeed even their nationality as U.S. citizens. An incredible story. I'm in no position to speak from experience on matters like these, but we have folks here tonight who can and will and bring this to light for you. In my mind, there's no one better suited to open this discussion and to lead it than our 34th Chief of Staff of the Army, General Eric Shinseki. He also served more recently as the nation's 7th Secretary of Veteran Affairs. And if you are, like me, a veteran, you know how important that was and how well he did with it. Rick was raised in Hawaii less than a year after the Japanese attack on Pearl Harbor. His parents, like other Japanese Americans at the time, were labeled. They were classified by the U.S. government as enemy aliens. To prove their loyalty to the United States, 3 of Rick's uncles enlisted in the Army. They served in Europe with the storied 100th Infantry Battalion and the 442nd Regimental Combat Team. Motivated, I think, in no small part by his uncle's selfless service and personal sacrifice, Rick followed in their footsteps, so to speak. He became the first Japanese American to serve as 4-star general, and as I said, our Chief of Staff. Ladies and gentlemen, General Rick Shinseki.
Good evening, everyone, and as we say where I come from, aloha. Aloha. Ooh, a little weak. Not many Hawaiians. Not many Hawaiians up and awake. Well, General Hartside, thanks for those very kind words, always. Thank you, and my thanks to you as well, along with General Sullivan and others from the Army Historical Foundation for hosting the telling of these soldier stories, which to my mind adds texture, and in some cases immeasurable texture, to the history of our Army, that history we know so well. Let me just recognize a few seniors, my seniors in the audience. I think General Croson is here, General Richardson, General McNair, other flag and general officers present, distinguished guests. And then for all the rest of us, good evening, everyone. Thank you all for being here. As General Hartzog says, I was born in Hawaii about a year after Pearl Harbor, and I spent those early years there in the middle of the Pacific Theater of Operations of World War II. Distance and diversity, those two words, go a long ways to defining the enormity of the Asia-Pacific region. Distance and diversity. And these complexities also defy most efforts to easily capture the Asian Pacific Islander American experience in this country. Today, over 16 million Americans trace their roots to Asia and the Pacific. And despite vast differences, there is still much that we have in common. With few exceptions, we're mostly people of color. Many of our histories are linked intimately to the Pacific Oceans and the island communities dotting it. Some ancient islanders perfected the art of navigating without instruments, using instead just the currents, the stars, and the winds, and found their way across broad reaches of the Pacific Ocean. Even today, they did so with such accuracy that even today, mariners and helmsmen trying to retrace their passages using modern instruments have still yet to decipher how they were able to do it. Many among us find our heritage rooted in the cultures of two of the world's most populous nations, China and India, where many never see the Pacific Ocean in their lifetime. Culturally, we're a collection of talented and creative peoples whose music and art and dress and cuisine, language, customs are so varied that they span social structures from Stone Age tribes, even today, to Space Age societies. We come from kingdoms and empires, democracies, and yes, even a few repressive regimes, which drove some to this country in search of freedom and opportunity. Now, those who made the original journeys from their old countries left behind all the security they knew. And put yourself in their position if you were considering doing the same thing today. Uprooting yourself from all the security they knew, their family, their friends, whatever work they're able to find, whatever property they own, oftentimes just a shack or a hut on a very small plot of land. They were, in my mind, courageous beyond imagination, taking that leap, immersing themselves into the swirl of 20th century human migration, simply for the promise of opportunity. For most, the immigrant experience was a saga of struggle and hope, prejudice and perseverance, passion and pride, and eventually, for many and most of them, triumph. Triumph that occurred in the sugarcane and pineapple fields of Hawaii, the farm and fruit orchards of the western United States, the fishing grounds off the Gulf Coast and off the coast of Alaska, and the thousands of miles of railroad track crisscrossing this country, and at countless other stops in between all those images. Asian and Pacific Islander Americans have shed their blood and given their lives for our nation to preserve democracy. Today, roughly 100,000 service members claim Asian or Pacific Islander heritage. And so tonight, to summarize those stories, I know some of you think that I was going to be the headliner tonight. I'm just a warm-up act. To summarize these stories, we have 6 presentations describing the rich and varied journeys of Asian Pacific Islander Americans in this country. Tonight's first topic, Duty to Country, America's Filipino Soldiers of World War II, will be presented by Major General Tony Taguba, U.S. Army retired. Tony also served as our beach master in organizing, reviewing, and rehearsing all the presentations tonight. So Tony, thanks for all the hard work you put in here. Next will be Japanese-American Nisei soldiers of World War II. Nisei, second generation Japanese Americans in this country. I'm a Sansei, I'm a third generation. And that presentation will be made by Lieutenant Colonel Mike Yaguchi, United States Air Force, retired. Third will be Chinese American World War II soldiers, honor and duty, Mississippi Delta Chinese. I know nothing about it, so I'm looking. You know, it just hit me in the forehead. I can't, I'm looking forward to a presentation by Samantha Cheng, who will be making that presentation. And then following Samantha, a Korean American soldier's story. It's a story of Colonel Young Ok Kim, United States Army, retired. And that will be presented by Mr. Sam Ewan. Then Vietnamese American Army soldiers presented by Brigadier General Viet Luong, United States Army. And last, South Asian American Army soldiers presented by Mr. Saif Khan. And so that's the lineup for this evening, 6 presentations. I think you will find it exciting and interesting. And I know I have lots of friends in the audience, and you know, forgive me for not mentioning you all, but I've got people that I left high school with, entered the military academy, left the military academy, entered the Army, left the Army with, so there are a lot of you in the room. But thank you all for being here. And so with that, let me invite General Taguba to make the first presentation. Tony?
Thank you, sir, for your kind introduction. I'm not the headliner either, so I'm just a presenter. Well, good evening, everyone. Before we show you a short video on Duty to Country, America's Filipino soldiers of World War II, let me just briefly introduce to you their story. The Filipino soldier story started in 1898 when the United States seized the Philippines from Spain. The United States Army formed the first contingent of the Mount Cabibi Scouts to help them fight Filipino insurgents prior to World War I. Soon thereafter, the Philippine Scouts and Philippine Commonwealth Army were organized under the Philippine Commonwealth, a United States territory. In July 26, 1941, President Franklin Roosevelt issued a military order placing all organized military units, United States and Philippine Army units, in the Philippines under the U.S. Army Forces Far East, commanded by General Douglas MacArthur. And after Bataan and Corregidor fell in April and May 1942, respectively, several guerrilla units commanded by U.S. and Filipino officers were formed across the Philippine archipelago to continue fighting the Japanese imperial forces. My father was one of thousands that were captured at Bataan, who later escaped the death march and fought as a guerrilla, things that we did know nothing about until 4 months before he died in 2011. Later in February 1945, the 1st Filipino Infantry Regiment, the 2nd Filipino Infantry Battalion, and 1st Reconnaissance Battalion, all organized in California, arrived as part of the Liberation Force and then stayed until October 1945. On February 18, 1946, the Rescission Act was passed by Congress and signed by President Truman, which stated, and I quote, "Service before July 1st, 1946, in the organized military forces of the Commonwealth of the Philippines, while in the service of the armed forces of the United States, pursuant to the President's order dated July 26, 1941, shall not be deemed to have been on active military, naval, or air service for the purposes of any law of the United States, conferring rights, privileges, or benefits upon any person by reason of the service of such person or the service of any other person in the armed forces." This basically meant that thousands of Filipino soldiers were deprived of their benefits and their nationality as U.S. citizens. They were stripped of that under the Commonwealth status of the Philippines. Of the 66 countries allied to the United States during World War II, only the Filipinos were denied their benefits. Over 60,000 were killed in action, thousands more were wounded for life and missing in action. This year marks the 70th year of the Rescission Act. Of the 260,000 soldiers and guerrillas who fought in the Philippines, less than 18,000 are living today in the U.S. and in the Philippines. Two of these soldiers are with us today, Mr. Celestino Almeida, 99 years old, with the Philippine Commonwealth Army and a guerrilla, and Mr. Rudy Panagdima, who's 86 years old, with the U.S. Army Guerrilla Forces. Would you please stand and be ready? I also want to highlight that a few weeks ago, there were 4 of them living in Virginia, Maryland, and the Washington, D.C. area. One could not attend tonight, but Mr. Jesse Baltazar passed away in April 12, 2016. Now, the surviving veterans and families are seeking patches of the Filipino Veterans of World War II Congressional Gold Medal Act of 2015 from Congress. It is their last attempt to gain recognition for their wartime service on behalf of this country. They've long waited for 3/4 of a century, and I can assure you they cannot wait another year. The Gold Medal Act is sponsored by Senators Mazie Hirono and Dean Heller, and Representatives Tulsi Gabbard and Joe Heck. It is our moral imperative, especially for Congress in our country, to recognize America's Filipino soldiers of World War II. They remain loyal, steadfast, and stalwart to the United States through these long, desperate years, despite the humiliation, the injustice, and indignation they suffered after the war. And I think, and I think you will all agree with me, that they deserve to be recognized. And I would ask you to support them. So let's please show the video.
a day that will live in infamy. Certainly words by then U.S. President Franklin Delano Roosevelt, that he said to the Congress and the nation after that fateful day, the attack on Pearl Harbor. America was at war. For most Americans, World War II was a two-front war, Europe and the Pacific. But for many Japanese Americans, the war was actually a three-front war. On the heels of Pearl Harbor, Executive Order 9066 was signed, removing thousands of Americans of Japanese ancestry from the West Coast into America's concentration camps or war relocation centers or internment camps, as they were called back then. But a Hawaiian unit, the 100th Infantry Battalion, was sent to North Africa. Their valor in North Africa and on the fields of Europe eventually prompted Washington to ask for other Japanese Americans from within these camps to serve in a new infantry unit, the 442nd Regimental Combat Team. The Army also sought from these same camps linguists to serve in a secret military organization called the Military Intelligence Service, or MIS. And these Nisei, or second-generation Japanese Americans, would serve principally in the Pacific theater. The video that you're about to see describes the awarding of the Congressional Gold Medal, the highest award that U.S. Congress can bestow on an individual or a group. And in this particular instance, to the Nisei soldiers who served in the 100th Infantry Battalion, the 442nd Regimental Combat Team, and the MIS during World War II. Let's take a look at the video.
In this digital exhibit, you'll learn why the Congressional Gold Medal was awarded to a group whose bravery is only a part of what makes them special. The Nisei soldier of World War II, brave men and women, endured hate and prejudice at home, but never lost their patriotism. In this exhibit, you'll find the stories of 12 remarkable people representing a generation who witnessed man at his very worst, but showed us man at his very best. Unprecedented accomplishments that have created a reputation that is inspiring generations to come, a legacy to be preserved and shared. Each individual story teaches us not only about that person, but about the world that person lived in. From a soldier left with a lifetime of screaming nightmares to pulling off a glider invasion in the south of France where just landing was life or death. Frightening, heartbreaking, but moving stories of sacrifice and inspiration. Like Stanley Hayami, whose priceless diary with his written words and beautiful drawings speaks for thousands of young men like him. Takehiro Higa, while interrogating the enemy, discovered they were his own classmates from when he went to high school in Japan. Daniel Inouye would lose his arm, but gained the respect of the entire country as a beloved U.S. Senator. Susito went into every battle with 3 special items. They were brave soldiers who never let fear stop them, many never coming home, leaving a mother to receive back her own picture, now permanently stained with her son's blood. And not just men, but Nisei women like Terry Toyomi Nakanishi were equally important. Diverse, invaluable roles during the war, but none more dynamic and legendary than the immeasurable sacrifice so many made on the battlefield, proving they are loyal Americans willing to die for their country, recognized decades later with the Congressional Gold Medal, the highest civilian award given by the United States Congress. In addition, 21 Nisei soldiers were awarded the Medal of Honor, America's highest military honor for incredible acts of bravery on the battlefield. They served in the 100th Infantry Battalion, the 442nd Regimental Combat Team, and the Military Intelligence Service, segregated units that today are considered among the best the U.S. military has ever seen. And to think many accomplished this while their families were incarcerated in American concentration camps. Theirs is a story of patriotism, courage, citizenship, compassion, perseverance, and humility. True American heroes deserving of the Congressional Gold Medal. This is the Congressional Gold Medal. This is the Congressional Gold Medal, awarded to one of the greatest fighting units in military history. Brave warriors who unflinchingly dove into battle during World War II, no matter the odds. Men who bled and died for their country. But that's only part of their story. They're known as the 100th Infantry Battalion, the 442nd Regimental Combat Team, and the Military Intelligence Service. As was policy at the time, they were segregated units of Japanese Americans called Nisei, born in the United States and Hawaii from immigrant parents. What's remarkable, they fought while many of their families were unjustly locked up in American concentration camps, dying on the battlefield for the very country that did that. These brave men called it loyalty. They believed fighting and dying for the United States of America would allow their families to live a more normal life, a life of acceptance. Like the 100's Sadao Munomori, who courageously fought through some of the toughest battles in the war. On April 5th, 1945, a live grenade bounced off his helmet and toward two of his comrades. Diving on top of it, Munomori smothered the blast, saving his men at the cost of his own life. Months later, the picture of his mom he always kept with him was returned to her, now stained with his blood. He would become the first Nisei in history to be awarded the Medal of Honor. 442nd's Daniel Inouye from Hawaii found himself face to face with 3 German machine gun nests. Shot in the stomach, the leg, and losing his arm, he fought on, silencing all 3 nests, earning him the Medal of Honor. This great warrior survived to become one of the most beloved senators in American history. Khan Tagami's dangerous covert world of the Military Intelligence Service had him sneaking through the jungle with a handful of brave men, within earshot of the enemy, using what he heard to help guide his men out of danger. After the war, he would become General MacArthur's right-hand man and the only member of the occupational forces to have a private audience with the Emperor of Japan. Thousands of individual stories of bravery and sacrifice, accompanied by great humility. Men who fought fiercely through Italy, France, Germany, the Pacific, and then dealt with hate at home. By the end of the war, the 100th 442nd was the most decorated unit in American military history for its size and length of service, and the MIS is credited with shortening the war by 2 years due to their remarkable ability to stay a step ahead of the enemy. As President Harry S. Truman welcomed the Nisei home, he said,
"You fought not only the enemy, but you fought prejudice, and you've won."
An exceptional group of young men, forever a symbol of courage that goes far beyond the spilling of their blood, whose depth and sacrifice, combined with absolute modesty, are now embodied in this Congressional Gold Medal. Find out more about these incredible American heroes at cgm.smithsonianapa.org. Stories of remarkable fortitude during the most difficult of times, from the diary of a teenager revealing so much about a generation to a Nisei soldier's granddaughter who became an Olympic superstar. All part of a chapter in American history few have heard.
Thank you. I'm going to introduce our next presentation, Ms. Samantha Chang.
Thank you, Mike. Hi, everyone. Thank you for taking the time to be here this evening. It's a very, very important part of our history that's being displayed today that not many people know about. I am very honored to share this story with you, but I do have to acknowledge 2 very important people in the audience, Dr. Gwendolyn Gong and Dr. John Powers, whose research identified 182 World War II veterans from the Mississippi Delta. And yes, there are Chinese people in Mississippi. We were really surprised when we found out. So this is a 3-part documentary, but we don't have enough time to show the entire piece to you, but we will show you what we call a teaser or a trailer. It's a 9-minute video that encapsulates the feeling of what the Delta vets went through and what the Chinese went through to become citizens. And it's told through the voices of 24 World War II veterans, as well as community members and their families. So, without further ado,
a small group of Chinese soldiers from the Mississippi Delta some young and some in their 40s, fought in World War II. The story of how these Chinese came to Mississippi and what led to their experience in the war is both personal and universal. During World War II, 13,000 Chinese served in the United States Armed Forces. Surprisingly, over 180 Chinese came from the Delta region of the state of Mississippi. When you think about it, 180 Chinese serving in the U.S. military from the Mississippi Delta is a disproportionate number for a state not well known for its Chinese citizens. How did these Chinese come to live in the Mississippi Delta? Who were these men? Why did so many of them enlist in the armed services? Did growing up in the Mississippi Delta influence their sense of duty and patriotism?
I was trained for, invasion, but land crap, hit the beach, land troops.
32nd Division and assigned me 107 medical corps, to take the wood soldiers from front line to the aid station.
And the idea was that even if we only save one life to the effort, it would be worth it. So I was in the 9th Air Force, and our planes dropped paratroopers.
We know when we go overseas that we're going to participate in combat duty. We know there are elements of danger. There are possibility we probably wouldn't come back home alive. But we feel, all of us feel, everyone in the whole group, in the whole army, I think everyone in the whole army, that felt that that was our duty. Our country called us to serve that particular duty, and we had sworn to serve. So we just think it's about, we just serve what we can, do what we can.
The Mississippi Delta has often been characterized as the most southern place in the American South. Socially conservative, racially segregated, and predominantly rural. It is an area where social and cultural characteristics are unique and extreme. The Delta lies between the Mississippi and the Yazoo rivers and hugs the northwestern region of the state. Its name evokes images of lazy summers, large magnolia trees with plantation-style homes off in the distance, folks sipping cold iced tea and lounging on porch swings or rocking in chairs on the veranda while watching farmers and sharecroppers tending the soil and workers picking cotton in the fields. This region has many ghosts from yesteryear, as it was once notoriously known for its use of slave labor. It later became a place with the largest number of freed black farmers. Its small towns birthed many of the nation's blues and jazz legends, while its political history connotes racism and segregation. Who would have thought that this region of the Deep South would develop into an enclave for hundreds of Chinese families? Let's take a step back in time and look at the broader picture of Chinese immigration to America. In the mid-19th century, many Chinese from China's southeastern province of Guangdong began to arrive in America, lured by the prospect of gold and the hope of a better life. America became known as Gumsan, Gold Mountain. When the mines dried up, the Chinese did not leave the United States. They went on to build railroads and levees, labored on farms and fisheries, and worked as launderers and cooks. The Chinese laborers who went to work in the South after the Civil War have all but disappeared from history, with very few statistics that note the number of Chinese who once resided in the Mississippi Delta. Early evidence of this southern migration is found in the 1870 census, which recorded 16 Chinese men living in the state of Mississippi. What brought them to the area? Letters and newspaper articles indicate that these Chinese men were recruited as laborers on farms once cared for by slaves, now free men. These 16 Chinese lived in Bolivar County, one of the 18 counties that comprise the Mississippi Delta. In the 1880s, the Mississippi Delta Chinese community grew to 50 people, with 28 of them living in Washington County, and the other 22 scattered across neighboring counties within the Delta. During this time, Chinese laborers were plentiful, hardworking, and inexpensive to hire. They were willing to do almost any job asked of them, at great risk to themselves. Because of this and the fact they dressed differently, ate differently, and spoke a language that sounded so strange, the Chinese worker was seen as a threat to white labor. That threat led to fear. That fear became the impetus for the Chinese Exclusion Act, passed by Congress in 1882. This act prohibited the immigration of Chinese into the United States. In 1892, an amendment was made to the Exclusion Act, and the exclusionary laws were extended for another 10 years. In 1902, it was extended again, and then became permanent in 1904. Many of the Chinese came directly to the Mississippi Delta from China. Others came from various regions within the United States soon after the Transcontinental Railroad was completed, or when mining work dried up. Some would think the Chinese migration to the South was natural, as the landscape and climate of the Mississippi Delta and southern China were similar. Whatever the reason, they came. Many immigrated under their own names because they fulfilled certain criteria specified in the exclusionary laws, while others came as paper sons. A paper son was a Chinese man, young or old, who entered the United States using false documents, declaring that he was a son of a Chinese man already living in the States, thus allowing him to come into the country legally. Whichever route they used to make their way to the U.S., they arrived committed to working in the family businesses of their fathers and sponsors. As they did, they settled down and put deep roots in the Mississippi Delta. Families were started, businesses were built, and soon their mark became apparent as communities developed and their lives and those of others were bettered. According to the 1890 census, the number of Chinese in the Mississippi Delta area grew to 147 and almost doubled during the first decade of the 20th century. The Chinese of the Mississippi Delta faced enormous challenges both socially and economically. Yet this region uniquely afforded the Chinese opportunities that other areas in the United States did not. In the early 1900s, more Chinese moved to the South and set up small grocery stores. These stores catered specifically to the Black community, filling a void left when plantation stores closed. Consequently, the Chinese found themselves filling fundamental needs through their small-town groceries and markets to both the Black and white communities, and they began to be accepted in both groups. As their businesses grew, so did their social and economic status. Although the Chinese Exclusion Act was repealed in 1943, it would be World War II and the military service of these Chinese men that would be the catalyst, changing the trajectory of the development of this unique community in the Mississippi Delta.
I want them to know I just do my duty. I want them to do their duty if the nation to call them to do it. I want to they be proud to be a Chinese.
This is their story.
So thank you, and I'd like to introduce now Sam Young.
Thank you very much. It's really an honor for me to be here. It's one of the few civilian presenters. I feel a strong sense of pride in our community and our country. So thank you for this opportunity. The video that I'm introducing is kind of closely linked to the video before this one about the 442nd Regimental Combat Unit 100th. It'll be clear when you see the video. I'm pleased to introduce Colonel Young Ho Kim, U.S. Army, highly decorated, courageous combat leader during World War II and the Korean War, as well as a tireless humanitarian. This is a story of selfless duty, deep loyalty, and just an undying commitment to serve those in need. This video was produced by a Council of Korean Americans and narrated by one of our members, Professor Ed Chang of the University of California, Riverside, whose research center is named after Colonel Young-ho Kim. It recounts his patriotic duty to serve his country and to overcome the discrimination and intolerance of his time. Colonel Young-ho Kim is being nominated this year for a Presidential Medal of Freedom by Senator Mazie Hirono and Congresswoman Judy Chu. It's the nation's highest civilian honor awarded by the President, but it has been given to military figures of the highest distinction, including General Wesley Clark, General Colin Powell, as well as world leaders such as Mother Teresa, Archbishop Desmond Tutu. If Colonel Young-ho Kim is awarded the Presidential Medal of Freedom, he would be the first Asian American military figure to receive that honor, and the first Korean American. So without further ado, watch the video.
If you look at his entire life as a soldier, as a humanitarian, I cannot really think of any other person who deserves a Medal of Freedom than Colonel Young-ho Kim. People don't know about him. And his story needs to be told. His story needs to be heard. Young-ho Kim is known for being one of the greatest soldiers in American history. He is most famous for his accomplishment as someone who went through so-called battle in Anzio. There was a no man's land between the German defense line and the Allied forces trying to launch major attack. And anything moves, either Germans and the Allied forces will shoot at each other. So they were afraid to launch an attack. But Young-ho Kim volunteered. He crossed into the landmines and captured 2 German prisoners of the war and brought them back to the Allied forces. And based on their interrogation answers, Allied forces were able to launch an attack and liberated Rome. So that is one of the greatest story actually about Young-ho Kim. You know, at the time, 1950s, minorities were viewed as inferior people. And he was proud of the fact that he became the first minority battalion commander during combat in U.S. Army history. That really shows, what kind of a soldier he was. When he was assigned to 100th Battalion, his commanding officer told him, "This is a mistake. I will transfer you out to another unit." And Young-ho Kim said, "I just got you, sir." And he said, this is mostly Japanese American unit. And I know you are Korean, and Koreans and Japanese don't get along. And he said, "No, sir. I'm American, they're American, we'll fight as an American." And so commanding officer said, "If your Japanese American man accept you, then I will let you stay." When he plans a battle, he cares deeply about his men. He doesn't want to sacrifice his men. They all knew that. He himself, risked life many, many times. And that's the reason why he was wounded so many times. So many Japanese American men, soldiers, began to believe that if you go with Young-ho Kim, you will come back alive. So that's how he earned their respect, and that's how his legacy was born. There are many great war heroes out there, but his story doesn't end there. It begins with that. Young-ho Kim was a great humanitarian. He highly valued human lives. And so when he landed in Busan, he saw all these young orphans begging for food and sea ration. So he stopped and told all of his men, you guys, don't need all this sea ration. Why don't you take what you need and give everything else to me? So he collects all these sea ration boxes and gives to the young orphans. during the battle in Italy, he said, if I survive this war, I will work for the betterment of the community I belong to. And he kept that promise until he passed away.
Thank you very much. I now have the pleasure of introducing Brigadier General Viet Long.
And I know, gauging on my imposing stature, most of you guys are thinking that the Pentagon has decided to send its most handsome and powerful Asian American flag officer since Chiang Shin-seki. Although that still may be true, but I am, I believe, the only Asian American flag officer on the Army staff, so therefore easily taskable by General Taguba, like all the time. And, in addition to that, by default, been the most handsome, competent. So, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, good evening. On behalf of Vietnamese American servicemen and women, thank you for the warm reception and the opportunity to tell our story. Although our story is relatively new compared to other groups, it is as equally as profound in that we are the direct results of our nation's Vietnam legacy. For some, it may be perplexing to know that despite coming from a war-torn country, thousands of Vietnamese Americans are proudly serving in the U.S. Armed Forces. And I hope perhaps some of our personal stories tonight may better explain the reason we serve. And I'll start with one that I know fairly well. This is an excerpt from a memoir I had penned several years ago. And this is Vietnam, April 1975, Tan Son Nhut Airport. On the evening of the 27th, the brilliant sun marked the beginning of another beautiful day. Through the radio, we found the situation outside the airport dire. Major South Vietnamese units blocking the North Vietnamese Army's advance were obliterated and murdered wholesale. To our chagrin, 2 South Vietnamese A-37 Cessna aircraft led by turncoat pilots bombed the airport the same afternoon. The sight of these aircraft made us cower under our parents. My father chuckled and told us not to be afraid because we were missing out on a monumental event in history. His coolness gave us assurance that things would be okay. However, the aerial bombardment was followed by barrages of 130mm artillery and 60mm mortar. Several people close by were injured by mortar fire. We heard their protean groans and we prayed for our own salvation. I was scared to death. I was lying on my belly, right next to my mom, and I clearly heard the intense palpitation in my heart. I closed my eyes and I recited my Hail Marys. We managed to live through the day, but with serious degradation of hope. And to add to the misery, we found out that the U.S. has seized all fixed-wing aircraft operation due to high anti-aircraft threat. So on the 28th, the mood at the airport was apathetic. People seemed to have lost all hope. We saw ghostly apparitions walking around with empty eyes, clothes and suitcase strewn everywhere. Although I was unsure what the future had in store for us, I knew that my stalwart father was still with us and things would be okay. In the afternoon, a young U.S. Marine captain and his radio operator walked up towards us and asked for an English speaker. My father stood up and talked to him for a few minutes, and at the conclusion, my father began giving general instructions to all the males in the area to begin clearing debris to allow helicopters from the 7th Fleet to begin rotary wing extraction. Several of the males became belligerent, so my dad had to calm them with his drawn .45. Within a few hours, the parking lot area and tarmac were cleared. At sunset, we saw a series of Marine CH-53 helicopters make the final approach towards Tan Son Nhut Airport. And on the 29th of April, thousands of Vietnamese began the orderly evacuation. The only possession we were allowed to take was a briefcase with essential documents and a few $100 US. When directed by the Marines, we loaded the lumbering 53, and within minutes we're at altitude. I remember stretching my neck to observe communist tracers coming up at us, and I remember the Marine door gunner answering in kind. Thankfully, the rest of the flight was uneventful. The aircraft landed after a short flight. We had no idea where we were. We thought we were on some big island off the coast of Vietnam. When we walked off the aircraft, my father told us we were embarked on the USS Hancock, which is a carrier of the 7th Fleet. And I remember tugging on my dad's shirt, asking him what it meant. And I remember him telling me, it means that nothing in the world can harm you now. So 39 years later, I became the Deputy Commanding General Maneuver for the storied 1st Cav Division. And all of my 7 sisters graduated from college with successful careers. Our success was predicated by numerous factors, but truly rested on a single fact, and that's being American. Being Americans meant that we were afforded the opportunity to embrace the wondrous privileges given to us by our Constitution and realize our immense dream. This fable story only happens in America. I'm an American by choice and not by birth, and I have chosen to serve this great nation as a 9-year-old kid in 1975, right on top of the USS Hancock, because I believe in everything that this country stands for. So you know my story is not all that special. Lapte Flora, who could not be here tonight, lived 8 years in the jungles after his dad made the ultimate sacrifice and his family had to flee communist persecution. On the 6th of June, he will be the 2nd Vietnamese American to pin on flag officer rank in the U.S. Army. All of these Vietnamese officers, U.S. officers of Vietnamese descent here tonight have similar stories. Commander Mimi Phan and her family lived in the jungles for 8 years because her dad had to attend re-education camp under the communist regime. Lieutenant Colonel retired Ross Nguyen's legacy is 3 generations of selfless service, beginning with his dad's service as a colonel in the ARVN, his own service, 26 years in the U.S. Army as an engineer officer, and continuing with his son, Ben Carlo, a West Point grad, and currently a lieutenant at Fort Stewart in the 3rd Infantry Division. You see, America to the world is what the USS Hancock was to the Vietnamese, and I offer that to you as one of the reasons why men and women are willing to put themselves in harm's way. Although we're not American by birth, but when it comes to defending this great nation, we won't take a backseat to anybody. Perhaps the words of Adlai Stevenson describe it best when he said, when an American says that he loves his country, he means not only that he loves the New England hills, the prairies glistening in the sun, the wide and rising plains, the great mountains, and the sea. He means that he loves an inner air, an inner light in which freedom lives, and in which a man can draw a breath of self-respect. But the price for freedom had been fairly heavy. We lost over 58,000 Vietnamese Americans and hundreds of thousands of ARVN troops in Vietnam. We lost 12 Vietnamese Americans in Iraq and Afghanistan and scores other wounded. And their stories are captured up here, and I hope we're doing it some justice. So while it is important to celebrate these ethnic events and embrace diversity, it is also important to pay tribute to our fallen warriors and those who serve, because without them, events like these and our American dream are impossible. Finally, I know we're talking about Asian Americans, but I always want to take an opportunity to talk about some of the great troops that I've served with. And I have many, many stories, but I don't have a whole lot of time, so I want to talk about 2 individuals which served with me in 3rd Brigade of the 101st Airborne, Raksan. Sergeant Bugatis and Specialist Brandon Lopez. Between multiple deployments to Afghanistan and Iraq, Bugatis has been wounded 7 times, albeit light enough to walk away, but this time he was pretty bad off, so I knew he was going to be evacuated to Landstuhl to receive better care, so I rushed to the Combat Support Hospital and I met up with him. When he came out of surgery, he said, Raksan 6, I want you to re-enlist me for 6 years. And I thought it was crazy. I asked him where did he want it to go, and perhaps maybe he wants to choose a safer lifestyle. And he told me, sir, if I heal, I want to come right back here and fight along my brothers. There isn't another place or another unit I want to be in. Brandon Lopez served in the same formation. This was the mountains of eastern Afghanistan in the tumultuous Paktika province, 2010. And he was assigned to my 1st Battalion, 187 Infantry, Rakhisan. And when we got there, we found out that there were enemy sanctuaries in our area of operation. And we came to a conclusion immediately that this is not going to happen. You know, we're the storied Rakhasans, and there's not going to be enemy sanctuaries within our area of operation. So I issued the orders for Lopez's battalion to clear out this enemy sanctuary. And it started out just the way we had hoped. The Taliban were willing to stay and fight instead of running away like they always do. And by the afternoon, we were putting the wood to the Taliban. Unfortunately, Lopez was badly wounded by RPG fire, and he was in pretty bad shape. So I knew I had to see him before he was getting transported to Lanchtu as well. And we had lost a number of soldiers during that firefight. So Brandon Lopez was blinded in both eyes, so I grabbed his arm and I said, Lopez, this is Rock 6. We're getting you to Lanchtu, and you're going to be okay. But you know, he wasn't really worried about himself. He started asking about his buddy, PFC Jeremy Brown, and I stood there in awkward silence because I didn't have the guts to tell him that Brown had made the ultimate sacrifice. Same morning. So before Lopez passed out, I remember him grabbing my arm, and he whispered, Rock 6, sir, I want you to know that I did my best out there. So it's hard for me to relive these moments, but the stories must be told because they are nowhere in mainstream media, and that I feel like it's my duty to tell their stories and allow the legacy to be told. And we're here celebrating because of men like Bucatas Lopez, my other numerous fallen warriors, and countless others who have sacrificed, including our veterans here from World War II to current Afghanistan and Iraq. Let us not forget. God bless you all. God bless our great nation. And I'll be followed by Saif Khan.
Thank you, General. Hundreds of patriotic South Asians have served and currently serving in the United States Army. Several soldiers of South Asian origin have made the ultimate sacrifice while serving America. Most Army veterans of South Asian origin either immigrated to the United States at a young age or came with their families or were born after their families immigrated to the U.S. Over 75% of the population of South Asians in the U.S. was born outside the country. South Asians are not only diverse in terms of national origin, but also possess a broad range of ethnic, religious, and linguistic characteristics that have not only added to the diversity of our Army, but have been critical in fighting enemies of the United States and accomplishing the mission. Today you will see a slideshow filled with stories of honorable service to our country by patriots originating in South Asia. The South Asian community in the United States includes individuals who trace their ancestry to Bangladesh, Bhutan, India, Maldives, Nepal, Pakistan, Myanmar, Sri Lanka, as you can see on this map. My name is Saif Khan. I was born in India. My family moved to the United States in 1993, and I decided to join the Virginia Army National Guard right after high school, while I still had my green card. Right before deployment to Iraq, the Army and Immigration authorities allowed me to become a citizen before being deployed to serve in Iraq in support of Operation Iraqi Freedom. I joined the Guard in 2000 and served until 2008. Recently graduated from law school at the George Washington University Law School, where I used my post-9/11 GI Bill, and I currently serve as president of the American Veterans Committee. I want to thank General Shinseki, General Taguba for this great opportunity to represent the South Asia region and highlight the contributions that Army veterans of South Asian origin have made, and to be a part of this AAPI committee. I would like to acknowledge a few special guests. My friend Lieutenant Colonel Ravi Chaudhry is here. He retired from the Air Force very recently and serves as presidential appointee on the White House Initiative on Asian Americans and Pacific Islanders. Welcome, Ravi. Mr. Dan Vigo Perketun is here. He's the president of the World Veterans Federation. He's joining us all the way from Norway with his wonderful wife, Annalie. He is in the United States representing over 45 million veterans from around the world. Welcome. Lieutenant Adil Rana of the New York City Police Department is here today. Adil is an Army veteran and currently serves as the commanding officer of NYPD's Community Affairs Immigrant Outreach Unit. Welcome. Army veterans originating from India make up the largest group in terms of number of military personnel of South Asian origin. The number of individuals of South Asian origin that have joined the Army is fairly proportional to the overall population of Indian Americans that have immigrated. This is Corporal Simran Marva. He came to the U.S. from New Delhi, India in 2006 to study engineering. As a Sikh, he always wanted to follow Sikh warrior tradition and wanted to join the military. In 2010, he decided to enlist in the United States Army as a combat medic. He received religious accommodation from the Department of Defense to serve in the Army with his Sikh articles of faith, as you can see. He became the first enlisted Sikh soldier to receive religious accommodation after almost 30 years since the policy changed in the early 80s. Accommodation issues still exist for new recruits seeking accommodation based on religious articles of faith, such as a turban or having a beard. Pictured here is Sergeant Balakrishna Dave, an Indian-born Army paratrooper. He was assigned to the John F. Kennedy Special Warfare Center in school. In this picture, he is explaining weapons range safety procedures to Indian Army soldiers in Fort Bragg, North Carolina. Pictured here is Colonel Gopal Singh Khalsa. He joined the Army in 1976 as a private. While serving, he received several distinguished honors. Colonel Khalsa recently retired after more than 30 years of service in the Army. This is Captain Pratima Dharm. She immigrated to the U.S. just before 9/11 at the age of 40. She was born in New Delhi, India. She served as the first Hindu chaplain of the Pentagon. This picture here is Major Siddhi Bose. He is an emergency physician and Iraq War veteran. Major Bose was featured on Untold Stories of the ER. He was also the first physician to treat Saddam Hussein after he was captured. He has been awarded the Bronze Star for his service in Iraq. A search of the National Archives Veteran Service Records indicates names of Indian Americans among service members that have served since World War I. As you can see, a common Indian name, such as Singh, was used to search for records, and it yielded results that indicates that individuals with the last name Singh have served since World War I. Pictured here is Bhagat Singh Thind. He came to the U.S. in 1913 to pursue higher education opportunities. He served in the Army during World War I. A few months later, he was promoted, received honorable discharge with his character designated as excellent. He applied and received U.S. citizenship. However, Mr. Thind's citizenship was revoked a few days later on the grounds that he was not a free white man. The case went all the way to the Ninth Circuit and the Supreme Court. The Supreme Court delivered a unanimous opinion in 1923 agreeing with the INS position. In 1926, Immigration Services issued a certificate canceling his citizenship for a second time. They also initiated proceedings to rescind U.S. citizenship of other Indians. Between 1923 and 1926, the citizenship of 50 Indians was revoked. The Barred Zone Act of 1917 had already prevented fresh immigration of Indians. Mr. Thind once again applied and received his U.S. citizenship to the state of New York in 1936. Finally, he was able to become an American citizen. This likely happened because New York either disagreed with the decision of the court, or they did not have that information. Sergeant Uday Singh was the first Army soldier of Indian descent we lost during Operation Iraqi Freedom. He's laid to rest at Arlington National Cemetery. Indian Americans have made the ultimate sacrifice while serving America. Sikh, Muslim, Christian, Jewish, and Buddhist service members gathered to celebrate Vaisakhi, the Sikh holiday, at the Pentagon just last month. It was one of the largest gatherings ever of Indian American service members. The General Counsel, Major Kamal Khalsi, is here. He's an ER doctor and member of civil affairs, member of a civil. More Indian Americans joined the Army, particularly members of the Sikh faith, who are required by their religion to wear a turban and maintain a beard. Captain Swati Rajpurohit is here as well. She serves as a nurse. Americans make up the second largest group of Army veterans of South Asia origin. Pictured here in Kuwait as a food specialist with the 539 Transportation Division. Mr. Katakir speaks 6 languages and uses his skills to help former President Bush with First Lady Laura Bush, Pakistani American Army Sergeant Wasim Khan at the State of the Union address at the Capitol building on February 1st, 2004. I wanted to be a part of something bigger than myself. Being a soldier was my American dream, my calling, my duty. Captain Humayun Saqib Muazzam Khan is buried. Captain Khan was a Pakistani American soldier who posthumously received the Bronze Star and Purple Heart. He was killed while serving in Iraq. The New York Police Department. Mr. Rana is a naturalized American citizen from Pakistan, immigrated to the Affairs Immigrant Outreach Unit. Moving on to enlisted to serve in the Army National Guard in 2009. The same year he became a U.S. citizen. He left Bangladesh in 2007 to come to the U.S. and says he has always admired the American military. I quote, "much happiness." Born in Nepal, in a village named Chante, and grew up in the farming and business household. His grandfather served as a priest for the Hindu service members in Burma, along with Indian Gurkha during World War II. He moved to the U.S. along with his family in 2005 on a diversity, a lottery visa, settled in New Mexico. There he attended
in the Soldier Experience series, Asian American Soldier Stories, Honor and Valor. On behalf of General Sullivan, General Hartzog, and Lieutenant General Schultz, thank you for attending. Tonight we've learned that time and again, Asian Americans and Pacific Islander Americans have answered the call and served our country dating back to the Civil War. The outstanding contributions of these soldiers, especially those who served during World War II, Korea, Vietnam, Desert Storm, and the global war on terrorism, demonstrated their duty of citizenship, patriotism, honor, and service to the nation. As an Asian American, I personally would like to thank you for your service. Tonight's stories of honor and sacrifice have paved the way for subsequent generations like myself, and have shown us as a nation that in spite of our diverse backgrounds, we're willing to serve and protect this great nation. Please join me in giving our veterans, especially our World War II veterans, and tonight's presenters a round of applause. The Army Historical Foundation and AUSA would also like to thank the Asian American and Pacific Islander Military Advisory Group, led by General Shinseki and General Taguba, the Smithsonian Institution, the American Battle Monuments Commission, and our Philippine Scout reenactor, Mr. Sean Conejos, who some of you probably saw and probably talked to. And finally, a special thanks to Jamie Huvens, Carrie Klein, Emily George, Danielle Iyer, and Chelsea Lawson for orchestrating tonight's program, exhibit stations, the graphics and digital displays.